Hey Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, Tim Adams here. Call myself Coach Tim Adams. For the last 30, I'd say 30 some years, I've been working with athletes, high achievers, high performers. Um, I've had the opportunity to work with individuals that you probably heard on the radio, individuals that you've watched on the big screen, um, NFL Hall of Famers, NFL MVPs, Super Bowl MVPs, Heisman Trophy winners, Stanley Cup champions, um, Olympic gold medalists, world champions. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the, I guess, most iconic athletes, performers in the world, and have been obsessed with performance my entire life. And been very fortunate to say that I haven't worked a day in my life, well, except maybe when I first was in the military. But for the last 30 years, I'd say I haven't really worked. I mean, I love what I do and am fortunate to be able to do that. So
So how did you get into that? And I've seen, if anyone would go on your website, there's some names on there that are pretty incredible. But how did you get into that, and how did you reach that level? I guess where people will call that successful. And we're gonna get into that a little bit later about what you think success is, especially being somebody that's worked with people that would the world would describe as successful. But how did you get into that, and how did you get into it on such a, I guess you could say, high level?
yeah, so my senior year in high school, I had shin splints and I was running track. And my coach told me to go pick a field event, but we didn't have a field events coach. So I picked the discus, but at the next track meet, I actually went to our rival high school's coach and asked him to teach me how to throw the discus. And his name was Coach Roweeder, and he looks at me and he goes, Tim, I coach for the rival high school. And I go, I know, there's only a few weeks left to track. I gotta, do something. I can't sprint. I'd love to learn how to do it. And you're the best. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what? If your coach says it's okay, then I'll do it. And I go to my coach, and my coach was our football coach, and he was like Popeye, big forearms, big neck, and when he got mad, he'd spit when he talked. And so I was like a little sheepishly going up to him, going, "Hey, Coach Moran, I asked Coach Warreader to teach me how to throw the discus," and he kind of looks at me, and I'm just waiting for him to erupt, and he goes, "That's a great idea," and I'm like, I was surprised. So every day after practice, I drive down the 30 minutes to our rival high school and learn. And for the first week, I didn't even have a discus in my hand. And then the second week, it just started flying off my hand. And next thing you know, in about 3 weeks, I win our districts. I beat all of his athletes, and I had never thrown the discus before. And it's not like I was like exceptional or anything, but that moment taught me the importance of learning from the best, and not just learning from anybody, but learning from someone who's competent, and not just somebody who's a step or two ahead of you, right? And I kind of took that lesson with me for my entire to this day, really. And I still travel the world studying under the best. And so every time I wanted to learn something, I'd go to the guy who created the technique. I'd go to the guy who was already, creating Olympic gold medalists, world champions, world record holders. And I ended up going around the world. And what it did for me in a very short period of time is it accelerated my ability to coach. It accelerated the results that I was able to get. And as a result, I in a very short period of time, I went from never having coached to coaching, being a head strength and conditioning coach in the NFL in a very short period of time, and being able to work with obviously some iconic individuals and get some ridiculous results, and it was reproducible, and it just kept getting better and better, and to the point where sometimes people say that's impossible, and I just go, well, apparently it's not. but, but but the reality is, like, when I tell people what I do, people don't believe it. Like I kind of got
Give us an
in.
example.
Well, so example is I got into this career because I played college football for a couple of years, and I tore up my knee my first year of football, and I tried to play one more year on it, and it wasn't happening. I got cut from the team, and I was like, I went to the Air Force Academy, and at the Air Force Academy, being a football player kind of protected you as a cadet, and I wanted that protection back, so I did everything I could to kind of get back into it, but I loved it. So I became a student coach is what happened, and that's kind of where it started, and I was really good at Olympic lifting, and so when I had the opportunity to do that, I started going down to our Olympic Training Center, which was the academy is in Colorado Springs, and in Colorado Springs was the Olympic Training Center, and that's where our weightlifting team was housed. So I'd go down and I'd learn from our Olympic coach. Then I'd come back and I'd help out our staff, and that's kind of where it started, kind of in strength and conditioning. So that's where I got my start, and then from there, when I was doing Olympic lifting, I had a problem with my shoulder, and one of our academy grads actually is a chiropractor in the area, and he developed a technique called active release technique. So I'd go see him, and I'd be able to lift the very same day because I couldn't get my arm over my shoulder. He'd work on me, boom, I'd get my arm over my shoulder, and I'd be like, wow, this is great. So when I came back to coach, I started sending our athletes down to see him. And then I got in trouble as a strength coach because I was sending them out of network. The medical staff was like, Tim, we need to know what's going on with the guys. I was like, oh, fair enough. That makes sense. So I'd send them to them, but they wouldn't treat them. And I was like, hey, what if I get certified? So then I got certified. And in the weight room, I'd have a line of like 50 cadets waiting for me to work on them. And then the strength coach would be like, Tim, you're not coaching, you're treating guys. And I'm like, yeah, but they're working out, before they couldn't even finish a workout, or they couldn't do a workout, or they couldn't compete, and now they are. And I'm like, isn't that great? And they're like, no, you're not coaching. And I'm like, oh. and so then from there we went to movement, and then I was like, all right, I don't know anything about movement. Who's the fastest guy in the world? And at the time it was Ben Johnson, and I was like, well, who's Ben Johnson's coach? And I didn't know him, and I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew him, and then within a week I'm sitting in front of Charlie Francis learning from him. And then later that summer a kid named Obadiah Thompson breaks a world record, and I'm like, well, who coaches Obadiah Thompson? And it was a guy named Dan Path, and I'm like, well, where's Dan Path? And I found out he was at the University of Texas, and at the time I was still working with academy kids and helping them with like combine training or their speed stuff. And again, I just started learning this. This is like May of '98. And like in August of '98, we had this all-comers track meet at the field house. And I see a guy with a Longhorn shirt on, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I run up to him, I go, where's Dan Paff? I need to talk to him. The guy looks at me funny, and he goes, why? I go, see those kids over there? I go, I'm working with them, and they need help. They're obviously. And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, they need some help." And I go, "Where's Dan? You know where he is?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're talking to him." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Wow. So we hit it off. The next week, he invites me down to University of Houston, and that's where Tom Tellez was. So within a 3-month period, I had worked with Charlie Francis, Dan Paff, and Tom Tellez, and those 3 guys had the top 4 guys in that 1988 Olympics. Wow. Charlie Francis had Ben Johnson, Tom Tellez had Carl Lewis, and then Dan had two Canadians. And I was learning from these guys, and these guys are like, they're iconic in the track and field world, right? And then in March of 80, it would have been 98. In the March of '99. I get asked by the Denver Broncos to come do their off-season speed training. So in less than a year, I'm now doing speed training, and I'd never done speed before in my life. And so then once that kind of opened the door to professional athletes, right? I mean, football players specifically. And that first year, I started, I picked up like 20 guys, and then they got traded to different teams. The next thing you know, now I'm traveling to different teams across the country working on a guy, and then he introduces me to a guy. Next thing you know, I got 4 or 5 guys on each team, and I'm making kind of a living traveling to every team and working on these guys. And as I'm working on these guys, some of the guys are like bubble guys, some of them are like the best guy on the team. And there was always this difference between the bubble guy and the guy who would eventually be in the Hall of Fame. And then I was like getting fascinated by what was the difference. And then it was like, oh my gosh, it's their mindset. And next thing you know, I just became obsessed with the mind, with the brain, with the psychology of performance. And then I wrote a book on the mental side of performance. And so anytime I do something and somebody's like, well, are you a speed guy? Are you a soft tissue guy? Are you a rehab guy? Are you a nutrition guy? Are you a sports psychologist? And I'm like, nah, I'm not really any of them. I'm kind of all of them.
You're all of them. Yeah.
Right. And look, I'm not. The thing that I'm fortunate of, excuse me, I got a little runny nose here. I got back from Asia, and
wow.
20-hour flight just, I think, kicked me in the butt a little bit.
Yeah, I've done that before. That's never fun to do those flights.
But so what the thing I tell people is like, look, I'm very fortunate. I got a network of individuals that if I can't solve the problem, I can either get on the phone and figure it out, or I can call them in and have them figure it out. And I've always been super open with my information. I've always been super open with bringing other experts in to help my clients out, and it only made me better. And it was never really this territorial thing for me. It was always more of like how I've always had the best interest of my clients in mind, regardless of whether I was on the outside of an organization working with the client or on the inside of an organization working with the client. And they're two totally different entities. And
yeah, so I want to touch on that for a second, because I know a lot of what I'm hearing over the last couple minutes that you were talking, you were, instead of, and I think a lot of people, they're afraid to face their competition, and they're afraid to, obviously, more than asking for help, giving help from their own competition, right? So like, from what I'm hearing you say is, you would just went straight to the best guy and like, hey, teach me. Instead of saying, that's my competition, I have to beat this guy, it's, hey, I want to learn from that guy that's going to make me better. Or I'm going to bring in somebody that maybe I'm not the expert in, but he's going to help one of my clients and that's going to make me look better. Talk to me and the audience about how you, I guess you could say, how you came to that conclusion where most people would be afraid to face their competition and go and say, hey, I want to learn from you, or I'm going to bring you in on my team, instead of saying, hey, you're my competition now, and now we're against each other. Talk to me about that.
So it started super selfishly, right? I'll be really transparent with you. I wanted to be the guy. I got into this industry wanting, like, I saw these guys that people coveted, that people were like, oh my God, I need this guy on my team. And I wanted to be that. And the only way I knew how to do that was to learn from him. And I kind of stumbled upon it. The reality of it is, I thought, like, from my perspective, I'm like obsessed with learning and wanting to perfect things and wanting to really understand the why behind the program, or the why behind how did this guy create what he created. I didn't really care about their programming. I cared about how he created the program. I cared about how he thought. And so every time I'd go meet these people, I just start asking questions. And I never really asked to see their program. I always asked to kind of pick their brain, and they'd always look at me like, "You're the first person that ever came to me and not asked for one of my programs." I'm like, "What good is your program going to do me? I want to know why you created it, how you created it, right?" And they were like, kind of surprised about that. And when I did that, it changed my relationship with them, and allowed me to say, "Hey, look, I'd love to bring my client down to you. I'd love for you to come see my client." And then it became this win-win situation where my client got better. And then as a result, actually, I got better. And I always looked at it from the perspective of, I'm getting the benefit here. My client's benefiting, but really I'm the one who is benefiting because I'm learning things that there's no way I would ever have the opportunity to learn if I was not one-on-one with this individual. And look, it was like a PhD in anything that I did, because I had if you think about it, I had this one-on-one coaching. It was like an internship that I was getting paid for.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah, it was, and I'd like to say I had it all figured out beforehand, but it started out super selfishly. And as I've aged, it's become very different perspective. Like now it's much more the greater good of everybody. But when I started out, it was all about me.
Well, look, I mean, it led you in the right place, so, right?
Yeah.
So, talk to me about, you kind of went from the physical, I guess you could say physical conditioning to mental conditioning. Talk to me about, how does somebody reach peak performance, flow, the zone? Yeah. Talk to me about that. So,
well, I think that's one of the biggest misunderstood concepts in sport right now. It's funny. I take a super different approach to the mind than most people. I think, and this is not knocking anybody in psychology or psychiatry or mental performance. It's not. It's just, my approach has always been to do it from the ground up and inside out versus top down. And I believe that when you put individuals in a situation where you challenge them physically to reach a level that they never have done before, where you're really on this uncharted territory of physicality, it automatically forces them to expand their mentality, and it forces them to face parts of their mentality that they've never been forced to face before. So I think if an athlete works with me, I'm going to find their limit, and I want to find their limits as soon as possible, because by doing that, it's going to tell me how they're going to respond under stress. It's going to tell me how they're going to respond in certain situations. And so if I can understand that, now every rep I take moving forward is going to be designed to help mold that, to help adjust that, to help expand that mentality, that mental capacity and emotional capacity as well. So it's been something that is a little different approach than most people, because I don't want to go into the mind to fix the mind. I want to go into the body to force the mind to respond in a way that I want it to respond, that's going to be more beneficial for the individual, on the pitch, on the field, on the ice, on the track, wherever they may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it sounds like you're trying to find that pressure point. And then once you find that pressure point, then you can perfect it. And almost you trigger that pressure point to a certain level, and then they start to automatically change their mind because you're tweaking that pressure point.
Yes, and by watching them work, you can find out, like, are they going to be reliable? Are they consistent? Putting them in work and putting them in a position that forces them to have to make a decision. Can I do one more rep? Will I do one more rep? What's the cost of pushing through this physical pain that I have And can I do that? Can I make the switch? Can I turn my frontal lobe off and be able to push through this pain? And it's at that moment that flow occurs. And it's at that moment that capacity begins. Your workout doesn't even start until I reach that point. And so most people think I just think there's this huge misunderstanding of flow. And I believe that you can train it. I believe that you can reinforce it. And I believe you can turn it on like that. And there are mechanisms that I teach my clients to be able to turn it on like that. And it's something that if practiced, you can get into that state optimally on a regular basis, right? I think this concept of how do I say this?
Flow being on and off.
Well,
or fly by night.
I think flow should be on and off. Like,
right.
What I think is totally misunderstood is people think that you have to turn it on and keep it on and you got to be intense the entire time. And I think that's a travesty in the mentality around college sports, where everything's rah, rah, rah. You got to give it all you got. And, you know, it's you get hyped up and you go past this point of being able to really control yourself because you're too ramped up. And the reality is the best performers I've ever seen, they're not ramped up. And it's not about getting emotional. In fact, it's about checking your emotions and really being able to kind of sit back and disassociate yourself from what is so that you can be. And it's almost a super Zen experience, if that makes sense. And the more I get into this space, the more this dissociation is important to me in life, in everything that I do. And it's something that I'm teaching now is how can I create this dissociation from my ego, from my frontal lobe, from me and my consciousness, so that I become much more of an observer in that space. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's something that I am vigilant with my clients around performance.
So you're spot on with regard to, that's exactly what I do with my clients. Is first of all, we're very big on NLP, and association versus disassociation is very big in NLP. And one of the things I'll tell my clients, and we just did a training for NFL draftees going into the NFL, is we said, instead of, like most athletes and most performers try to get, like you said, they try to get like all hyped up and they turn on the music and they're jumping, hitting their head against the wall. I was like, what if you did the opposite? Right. Where instead of losing control of your emotions and getting and PMSing them everywhere, listen to a slow orchestra or a classical piece by Mozart, right? And like you're saying, disassociate, get out of yourself for a second and kind of see everything that's going on around you, and really it like slows down time. And to us, what we do is that's how you get into flow, and that's how you reach peak state, is just instead of being in the moment from a non-controlling perspective, disassociate yourself, like you're saying, and allow yourself to see everything around you, and it just slows everything down. And then when you get on the court, it's not like things are happening in front of you and you're like, you don't know what the hell's going on. It's just everything's slow, and it's like, okay, I get it. I'm here. I'm confident. I'm okay. I'm not stressed. And you're in control of your emotions, essentially.
And I love that. And the other thing that does, right, is it takes away judgment. And that's the one thing that these young kids, they don't know how to control, is the emotion around the outcome, right? They're so
coaches also.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's so true. Oh my gosh. So
wow. So you've gone through a fair amount of injuries, and I'm sure you've coached around that too. How does someone get over them? I know over here we talk a lot about assumptions where if you get injured once, there's a lot of mental blocks going on inside of your head, and a lot of athletes assume that since it happened once, it might happen again. And that first time getting on the field, the court, whatever, the pool, after that injury is very, very scary. How do you deal with that, and how do you work with your clients with that?
Oh, it's such a great question. So I love to educate. I'm a huge educator. And again, I've been so here's the other part of what this breadth and depth of experience that I have does for me is it allows me to be able to manage someone through this process in a very structured way, right? So I love rehabbing guys because I know when a guy is ready, right? And if I know when a guy is ready, it's going to be easier for me to pass that confidence on to them, right? But really, I try to put the rehab process back into their hands. And so I educate them around, well, why did they get hurt in the first place? Because to me, there's a compensatory pattern, right? And a compensatory pattern is your body is going to adapt to the stresses that are imposed upon it. And sometimes those adaptations create limitations in range of motion. Sometimes it decreases the stability in the joint. So joint segmental stability. There's tiny muscles that are supposed to be firing at the right time. They don't fire at the right time. They become latent. And as a result, they cause these big global mobilizing muscles to start to compress and contract to keep the joint from moving, right? So when my athletes, every one of my athletes are like, they understand their anatomy and physiology probably better than other coaches that are actually coaching them. And when you understand your anatomy and you feel heavy or you have tension or you have decreased range of motion, it's a red flag to you indicating that something's off and you have to address it. And if you don't address it, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, you're going to have a traumatic injury. And so I often express to them, like, if your body feels like this or looks like this, or you have a mechanism in your range of motion that causes you to have this kind of movement, then you have an increased chance of injury. If you do these type of exercises or you get this type of work, then you can open up your body almost instantaneously. And it's that type of work that creates that type of a response that creates a tremendous amount of confidence in my athletes, right? So in the rehab process, not only are they doing that type of work, but we're building their capacity so that by the time they come back, I like to say that if you have this baseline and you got dinged, you're down here, your goal is not to get back to baseline. Your goal is to get above baseline. And ideally, you would have enough time to be able to do that, knowing that when you come back, you're beyond 100% confident that you're going to be okay, right? So it's in this rehab process that you're building this capacity physiologically, but really you're building it psychologically as well, if you're following me. And in this rehab process, you're testing them along the way and pushing them and butting them up against that zone, that space of not knowing what their limit is, and always going beyond that limit in some capacity every training session, so that they're learning that, okay, I'm getting better, or and it might be, I'm feeling like I'm beaten down, but when you go back and look at the video or you go back and look at the numbers, they're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm strong, but oh my God, I'm 10 times stronger than I was a week ago or whatever, right? So there's always this gauge of measurement / video proof and coaching and times that allow them to go back and say, oh yeah, I'm getting better. And then ultimately, when it comes time to get released to play, they actually feel better. They have that confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about uh, pressuring those points of weakness, and the stronger those pressure points become, the stronger they become mentally and physically. And I know exactly what you're talking about. When you feel strong, you don't necessarily feel stronger, but when you look back at something, you'll be like, oh my God, like look at me now and look at me here. It's like night and day. And sometimes you can even feel it in your body. You're like, you're a step quicker. Your shot's faster. You're running quicker. Whatever it is, you can feel that when you see it in contrast.
Absolutely. And there's a unique, and I'm sure you've experienced this, there's this unique amnesia that occurs with people that are in pain, and you get them out of pain, and then they're like, I was never in pain. Or making them do a movement that they're uncoordinated with, and then 2 weeks later they're like, yeah, I've always been able to do this. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, did you see this video? And they're like, oh, like they forget that they couldn't do it. It's really a remarkable experience. I mean, it's like clockwork. About 2 weeks in, they're like, oh, I've always been able to do this. I'm like, no, not quite. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah. So this might be a tough question, but we'll take a shot at it.
All right.
What has a client taught you? Because I know you're all about learning, and you're constantly looking to learn from others and the people around you and the people you work with. What has a client taught you that stuck with you for all this time?
Every client teaches me something. Every client. And so probably, I was very, again, blessed at the beginning of my career that one of my clients I got early on, a pretty iconic individual, loved how different I saw things from the get-go, and yet always and he had better understanding of anatomy than I did when I first started working with him. And he'd be saying stuff, and I'd be like, what are you talking about? I'd have never.
Did that scare you?
No, it didn't scare me. It motivated me. It made me go, I got to get my shits together, right? Like, this guy, he's an athlete and he knows more than me. And I'm like, that's not okay. Like, it's my job as a coach to be the steward of this process. And what was interesting was it made me listen to him more, and which was a great learning experience of, I really need to get in tune with my client like immediately, because they know their body better than I will ever know their body. And
right.
And this was probably the biggest lesson I ever got at the beginning, because it was like, it helped me create this like feedback mechanism to where I could read how they feel, but I would never assume how they felt, because I'd always create this feedback kind of loop with the athlete on, well, how do you feel? What's going on? Let's talk before we'd even do anything. And it was really this dance of what's going on, and it would happen the entire workout and throughout the period of time we're working together, which to me became this co-creation of the program. Like, and I always tell people this, when I create programs, I'll map out an entire year. Depending on the athlete, I might map out 4 years. And the moment we start the program, all that work I did to create that program, it's out the window, because the workout, that plan changes the moment the workout starts, because they may not be able to do the workout. They may have done more than the workout, and the next thing you know, everything changes. But I have to do that entire plan in order to understand where I'm going, right? And it's through the feedback that they give me that allows me to make that adjustment, if that makes sense. So this particular client, I learned so much from him, but the one of my greatest gifts from him in learning was forcing me to have to really listen to the client, right? It's not about do what I say, it's about how are you doing? Where are you? What do I need to make an adjustment? And it's not just verbal, it's also feel. I'll watch, I'll see, where's the body breaking down? Where's the the asymmetry occurring in the movement, and can I fix it on the spot, which is another reason why I did a lot of these techniques, because I wanted to fix things on the spot. And can I fix it on the spot, or are we done for the day? And being able to fix things on the spot allows you to do so much more work in a session, allows you to recover more quickly per session, which then allows you to do more work per week, per month, per year. And next thing you know, instead of making this kind of result, you're making these kind of results, right? But I could go on and on with what I've learned from different clients. I mean, it's been such a blessing. I really, and I'll say this: if you're not learning from your clients, I think you're making a grave mistake.
Or from people in general, right? Like, some people, they won't learn from anybody. It's, I know the truth. I know, everything in my field. I'm an expert in my field. Don't tell me what to do in my field. You find like people like that all the time. And that's a huge mistake. It's like you have to learn something from everybody.
Especially in this industry, right? I mean, This industry is really filled with territorial people. I am the one who developed this technique, or I'm the one who, came up with the squat. I heard some of the craziest things. It's like, I am the one who invented this exercise. I'm like, you did? I'm like, I've seen that thing around for 50 years. Anyway.
Wow. So awesome. Good stuff. We're going to do a quick round of fireside questions where I'm just going to throw some questions at you and you'll throw some answers back.
All right.
What is fear to you and how do you deal with it?
Oh, I love fear. Oh my gosh. Let's be quick. Fear is energy in motion for me. This is how I look at it. Fear is an opportunity to get a lesson, and I am relentless about getting lessons. And to me, fear is just an opportunity for you to really take stock in where you are, to help you come back to being present in this moment. Because fear is just something that you're looking out into the future, which means you're not present. And if you're not present, you're not able to perform. And if you're not able to perform, you're not going to get in flow. You're not going to be able to do anything that you want. So I like to tell people, you feel that fear, you do it anyway, but it's so much more than that. To me, fear gives you the opportunity to take a step back and evaluate your situation and figure out what is the lesson that you need to be getting. And the moment you get the lesson, the moment the fear disappears. And again, I'm relentless about getting that. I love fear, by the way. Love it.
I could tell. You love learning and you love failure. I could see that too.
I do, and thank you for saying that, because to me, I want to fail fast. I want to make my mistake now so that I can learn from it and not make it again, right? And it's the only way to get better is to fail. And that's like, oh my gosh.
It's a hard realization to come to, though, because nobody wants to feel that vulnerability.
Well, I got two boys, right? And they're 9 and 10. And my oldest boy, he's so handcuffed right now by the fear of embarrassing himself. And it's just something that I've been trying to work with him on, but it's like, he goes to school and he doesn't want to make a mistake. And so he just freezes, right?
Yeah.
So it's something we all have to experience.
Yeah. Fast.
I don't mind doing
it. Yeah. What, you've worked with a lot of people that I think the world would categorize as successful, but what do you consider success? What does success mean to you?
Gosh, you would have asked me that any time ago, my answers would change. For me, success has a lot more to do with what's going on inside, and how fast can you get your lessons, and how comfortable are you in your own skin, and what's going on inside you. To me, that's success. Success is about the journey. It's not about the outcome. because if you are committed and you have the internal alignment in on the inside from your mind, your emotions, your heart, your soul, if all of that's aligned, then that is success to me. Because if those are aligned, then what you are striving for, it's gonna come. It's just a matter of time. Like I've never put limits on any of my clients. I've never put limits on myself. And I just, you might not be making the massive gains that you once were, but I believe that if you're putting in the proper programming and the proper nutrition and recovery mechanisms and stress and loads, that you have the ability to improve. And yeah, there you go.
And it's something that I'm realizing now is that people, I think, like, before you reach that first stage, it's like, I want to reach success. And people are not sure if they can reach their personal level of success, whatever that might be. And then once you realize that it's possible, then it becomes how fast can you do it based on, going back to what we said before, how fast are you willing to fail and how fast are you willing to admit your mistakes and move on. And the faster you're able, it's like just get the speed up on the treadmill. And the faster you go through those motions, the faster you'll reach those levels of success, and the faster you'll grow, and the more you'll feel better about yourself. And it's just it just leads on to the next thing.
Yeah, so beautiful said. Yeah, I wish I would have said.
What's something you wish you knew at 21?
What I know now.
One thing specifically.
One thing. You know what? I wish I would have understood the importance of actually building a business. That would be the one thing that I would have done at 21, is actually build a business. Traveling around the country, working on a bunch of different people, going to people is not a business. So I would have built a business.
What do you mean by building a business?
Whether it's a brick or mortar, whether it's people come to me, I would have built something that's scalable. Like, I am very fortunate because I do have a lot of massive, beautiful experience, but it's not scalable. If I'm not in front of my client, I'm not getting paid, right? So how do you scale that? And so you build a business, and that's the one thing I would have changed.
Good, well said. If you could have drinks with one person alive, who would it be?
Did you say drinks with?
Yeah, or dinner, either one. If you're not
I love John Wooden. I just think I wish I would have had an opportunity to actually sit down with him. A brilliant mind, a brilliant human being, and an individual who really, I think, left this world a better place than when he came on it. So that's one person I for sure would have loved to play.
What about somebody alive?
Alive? Bill Belichick. I think that guy's a genius in more ways than one. So I'd love to connect with him.
Good, yeah. Who's your role model?
Oh God, that's a good question. Oh.
Some people can't answer it, by the way.
Yeah, and
I don't blame them.
I don't know if I really can, because what I would say is I would take bits and pieces from different people.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way.
Yeah. So
it's like there's not one thing from one person that you admire. It's just pieces and bits from everyone, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of how I built my knowledge base, right? Is little bits and pieces from everyone. So take the best of them all.
Yeah. What's your favorite book or movie, or both?
God, I love Winning by Clive Woodward. One of my favorite books that I've read. Movie, I like The Matrix. I always say that because I was just having a conversation with a buddy. Um, yeah, I'll go with that. That's good.
If you can share one message with the entire world, what would it be?
Ah. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I say this to my clients all the time. Um, one rep at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time. That's all it takes. Um, you want to accomplish anything, that's all it takes. Um,
And everything starts with that first step. Like if you're thinking about a marathon, before you run the first block, you're done with, right? Like you can't even start. It's just it's that baby step, and that's really where magic is, and that's where the success of anything you're trying to accomplish is.
Magic, right? Nothing will happen unless you take that first step.
Right.
Then you gotta take.
And by the way, going back to failure, it might suck, right? And you might not make it the first block. But if you want to get any farther than the first block, you got to start with the first block.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Oh.
Yeah.
So
Good stuff. Where can people find more about you?
Oh, my website's coachtimadams.com. I'm on Facebook, Coach Tim Adams. Instagram's Coach Tim Adams. I'm not heavy on the social media. I know I ought to be, but I'm not. But you can certainly get a hold of me at coachtimadams.com.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. We had a really good time.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions, and I love your insights. I love the nuance that you bring to the table, and that's something like the nuance is so important to me. Like I've built my career on nuances, right? And to find someone else who understands the nuance, refreshing, right? And I love it because I talk to people all the time, but a lot of things kind of go over their head, or they get caught on one topic, and you pick up on the nuances really quickly, and I love that. I could talk to you all day long, and
thank you.
I value that, right? And these are the kind of interactions that I like. Oh, I could talk to you all day, right? Because it's in the nuance that like the world opens up and opportunity just blossoms in the nuance. And everybody's like, oh, I got to do this. And I'm like, you're missing the crack. Like it's really this one thing, right? So I appreciate that. And so I see you got it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.